Hello, Region 10 President-elects. My name is Devin, your DRC nominee, and I'd like to welcome you to this introductory President-elect training video on chapter operations and best practices. As you know, we were unable to hold our scheduled President-elect training in Lake Tahoe early this year due to the coronavirus crisis. But we pivoted over to virtual training, which has been scheduled. And what we've done as a regional team is put together a series of instructional videos that you can watch at your convenience. These videos are housed on the ASHRAE Region 10 Chapter Collaboration Basecamp, so you should be able to get access to that. That's for you and all of your team members anytime throughout the chapter year. So what we're going to do today is go over some very quick best practices, and really I want to use this as an opportunity to kind of set the tone for your plan for your chapter year. But before we start, I want to say one thing, and that is thank you. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for the time that you've committed to your local chapter. Thank you for your commitment, your enthusiasm, everything that you've done to serve the members of your local chapter. Obviously, to get to this point where you're president-elect, you've spent several years probably working through in different chapter committees, holding different positions on the board, and so it takes really a high level of commitment. So thank you very much for that. The other thing I want to say is congratulations. I mean, you are president-elect. This means that next year you will be serving as the leader, the manager, if you will, of your chapter for the coming year. And so, as we know from ASHRAE's nominating philosophy, the office shall seek the person rather than the person seek the office. And so, what this means is that the reason you're in this position is because your colleagues, your chapter members, the other people on the board have recognized your achievements, the work that you put in at the local chapter level, and see that you are the right person to take over as chapter president this coming year. So congratulations. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into that, and we all know that there's a lot of responsibility. And sometimes when we start planning for our chapter years, there might be a tendency to think of just kind of following suit, just kind of doing what has always been done at the chapter level in terms of programs, operations, events, things like that. And one of the things that I'd like to challenge you as you start planning your chapter year is to not focus on just doing things the way they've always been done. Yes, I'm definitely, if there are best practices or things that you have found work very, very well for your chapter and serve your chapter members well, then obviously you want to continue doing that. But I ask that you kind of take a look, reevaluate some of the things that you have in place and not be sort of tied to just the way you've always done things. You have the opportunity to kind of make this your year and to really define, what you do and how the chapter operates based on how you feel will best serve the chapter and its members. We know that with great power comes great responsibility, and oftentimes that quote is attributed to Uncle Ben at Spider-Man, but at the same time, there are debates. I think that this quote, or the idea behind this quote, goes centuries back, to the French Revolution, to Voltaire, even to the Bible. But this idea that as a person in this leadership position, you do have a great responsibility to serve the members. And they've seen, again, as I've mentioned before, that you're that type of person who can really work and make the best out of this chapter year. And so my challenge to you this year is make your mark. Again, you don't want to just follow along with what's always been done in your chapter. This is your year. And so there are a lot of different things that you can do. You've got flexibility, and you want to really look at how you can really make an impact on your chapter for the year. So we're going to talk about 3 quick points when it comes to how to make your mark. First point is define your theme. What is important to you? How do you want what is your vision for this chapter year? Number 2 is to plan your year. What are the steps you need to take to make sure that you've got an effective and efficient plan to execute to get to the goals that you're looking at. And then finally, you're not going to do this by yourself. You're going to have a team. And you want to make sure that you empower your team so you're not doing all the work and that they come up as as future leaders as well within your organization, within your chapter, within your region, and ultimately perhaps within society. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the first one, and that is define your theme. What is your theme? What is important to you as the chapter president? Now, if you look back at President Daryl Boyce, our current society president, his theme is building for people and performance, achieving operational excellence. As many of you know, Daryl is has a extensive background in facilities management at a university up in Canada. And so he's been able to leverage that and use his experience and understanding of operational efficiencies and excellence at the facility level and kind of translate that to how we can be as efficient, as effective as possible within ASHRAE. And so that's his theme, that's his goal. Below these are certain initiatives. And so we see that with Daryl, with his background and what he feels is important, he's be able to really define what he'd like to accomplish in his society year as society president. So what about you? What are things that you want to do in your year as chapter president? What's important to you? And really, what do you think is important for your chapter to truly thrive, to really be successful? And so there are a lot of different things you can take a look at, based on your background, based on what you think makes the most sense for your chapter. Perhaps you've recognized over the past several years certain deficiencies or areas of improvement that you can really focus on. Maybe there's something that's been bothering you in terms of how chapter has been operated that you think might make sense to reevaluate. When you start looking at them, and these are just a couple of different examples in terms of say membership promotion or research promotion goals, mentoring programs, things like maybe you want to add additional social events to better engage with the local chapter members and prospective members. Maybe you want to start and focus on a women in ASHRAE, diversity in ASHRAE group. So what I'd like you to do is take a moment, if you haven't already done so, and really look at what you think is important, what you think is important for your chapter to thrive, and kind of define that as your theme. And you'll want to bring that to your board and have discussions about it and really kind of lay out what this 2021 year is going to look like with you as chapter president. Okay, so that is kind of defining the theme. I will say that as a regional team, we have a strategic vision for 2021, and that strategic vision is to equip, inspire, empower our chapter leaders to excel in all facets of chapter operations. And so as a leadership team, myself as the DRC, the RMCR, Buzz as the RMCR, all of the RVCs and the other regional leaders, we're all going to be focused on ensuring that whatever we do at the regional level is done towards these goals. What are we doing? Are we truly equipping, inspiring, and empowering our chapter leaders to truly succeed at that chapter level? So I share that with you as kind of a vision for what we're doing at the regional level. Certainly you can develop their own vision for what you want to do at the chapter level, but I also kind of show you this because I want you to all have this understanding that as a regional team, we're here to support you. Everything that we do is to support you and to contribute and help do everything we can to contribute to your success at the chapter level. All right, so that is your theme. Now, what's next? Well, obviously, if you've got a team, if you've got a vision, you want to translate that, you need a plan. And so how do you create that roadmap for success? What do you need to do now and then moving forward throughout the chapter year to ensure that you can hit the goals that you're looking for and really take that theme, that vision that you have to fruition? One of the great things is it's pretty easy, it's pretty straightforward because ASHRAE has a handbook for you. We have the Manual for Chapter Operations. And if you're not familiar with the Manual for Chapter Operations, I strongly encourage you to go through it. A lot of great information, but there are a couple of key sections that I want to highlight for you today. And one of them is section number 8, where it talks about MBOs, or Management by Objectives. And I'm sure most of you are very familiar with MBOs, but it's basically a methodology where you evaluate and you look at what your goals are, and then what are the steps, what are the kind of the the process that you need to put into place in order for you to achieve those goals. In order for you to have effective MBOs, it's important, and this is in Section 8, it really clearly outlines that in order for an MBO to really be effective, it has to be written. You've got to, obviously write it down, kind of put out what you're trying to accomplish. It has to be understandable so anyone can read it and really know what you're doing and why you're doing it. It needs to be measurable. This is key. Like any goal, you want to make sure that it's something that's measurable so that you can use that as a metric to determine whether or not you've successfully achieved that goal at the end of the time frame. It needs to be attainable. Sure, it'd be great if we had lofty goals to say, grow membership by 300%. But is that realistic? We want to make sure that these are realistic, but at the same time, the next point is challenging. So you don't want it to be too easy. You don't want it to be too hard. You want it to be something that, does require a concerted effort. But once you put in that effort and work through the process, it's something that conceivably you can attain, you can achieve. So attainable, challenging, agreed upon. It's something that you're going to need to be able to share this vision with your team, your board of governors, your committee members, so that everyone's on the same page. And when everyone's on the same page, everyone's working together, it makes it so much easier. And so this is really a key point. This is something that you would do at your chapter planning meeting. If you haven't already had that, something that certainly that you can do virtually over the summer to help kind of start planning out that year. Has to be costed, and it's kind of a weird term, but basically you have to understand what the fiscal impact is, if any. There may be some initiatives that you look at that you understand there's gonna be some costs involved, and so you want to make sure that you work with the board, work with your treasurer, so you understand, does it work within your chapter budget for the year? Have you really thought about that? And if it's important and it's something that requires funding, then it's something that, again, you would have to agree upon and move forward to execute. And then finally, time. It has to have some sort of deadline. Again, this is true. Anyone who's ever kind of gone through making goals, setting goals, and that not only does it have to be measurable, attainable, challenging, but it also has to have a time frame associated with it. So if you go through Section 8 of the Manual for Chapter Operations, you will see an example, and I recognize that on a video this may be a little bit difficult, but it is in the end, right at the end of Section 8. It gives an illustration of an MBO, and it first off shows what you shouldn't do, an example of an idea that someone might have that doesn't quite fit the criteria that we just went over on the last screen. And this one, for instance, says it talks about increasing the number of advancements from associates to full member. Well, what's the problem with that? I mean, it sounds like a great goal, right? But is it measurable? It doesn't have any specifics. And because there are no specifics, we don't really know is it attainable? Is it challenging? Are there any costs involved? What's the time frame? And so it shows an example of how this could be reworded to something on the order of to have 10 associates upgrade from associate member to capital M member by a certain date. In this case, maybe May 15th or so. So you can see, you set these goals, and when you have these goals, it becomes much easier for you to execute them as a team. The other nice thing, another nice part of the Manual for Chapter Operations, if you go to Section 1A, so this is the first appendix in Section 1, it talks about the year, scheduling the year. And this is something I strongly encourage. This is a great time to do it. We're in the summer. We're ready to kick off the society year 2021. And so what I've seen a lot of chapter presidents do is they'll take, it might be just a simple planner. It could be sheets of paper they just printed out. It could be something they plot and they put on their wall that maps out the entire society year. It could be electronically done on an iPad or even in your Outlook calendar. But it's a way to kind of see the entire year at a glimpse. You put in all of your meetings, you put in all of your board meetings, you put in all of your events, but then also what are the action items required at the certain deadlines in order for you to meet your goals. If, for instance, it's important that if you have a chapter meeting on one date, then you need to get the meeting announcement out at least a week, hopefully more, before then. So you have all these deadlines. And the other thing I like about this is it not only outlines kind of when I've got this, kind of what you need to be doing as chapter president throughout the year. But it also shows what other people need to do. What do your board members need to do? What do your committee chairs need to be doing throughout the year? And so this provides a sample roadmap, something that you can mimic, something that you can take on and kind of use as a way to map out your year. And it's also a reminder that, you know, I just said, you know, there are responsibilities that you need to look at, but also your board members, your committee chairs. This idea that you don't have to do it all yourself. You don't want to be the one to do it all yourself. You're not responsible for that. You're responsible for the chairs and the committee members and the board members doing their tasks, filling out their roles and responsibilities. And so this is a good snapshot, a good reminder of the fact that you need that team. You don't want to do that all by yourself. So let's talk about your team. Now, thank you to all of the chapters who filled out the survey. You know, one of the questions in the survey was a reminder that CIQs are due June 1st, and it was kind of to get a gauge for how we stand as a region in terms of filling out those chapter level positions. I know that many of the chapters are in very good shape. They've got either their entire CIQ filled out, or they have just a handful of positions that they anticipate being able to fill. But I also know that there are some chapters that are struggling. They continue to struggle with filling those positions. And so I know we're getting to the end there of June 1st, but at the same time, I'd like to have a dialogue with those chapters to see what we can do in order to help fill those gaps. I had the opportunity a number of years ago to see Malcolm Gladwell speak, and if you're not familiar with him, he's a renowned author. He's written a number of great books, and he's got this great mind in terms of how the dynamics of how people work, how people think in personal and professional situations. And he was talking about a study that had recently been done, a study that really looked at, in this case, European, well, I say soccer, football players and teams. And a study was done by these I think there were two gentlemen, and they were really trying to focus on what makes a successful team. And in the game of soccer, if you're familiar, there are a number of different positions, a lot of different positions, and for the most part, everyone stays in position, and the ball is moved forward from one end, to the centers, to the forwards, and such. And so the question was posed: Is a team how is a team impacted by changing players? And the question was, if you took their very best player and replaced them with the number one player in the league, how would that impact the overall team? Versus if you took the worst performing player and replaced them with someone who was marginally better. So what strategy would be used to improve that team? A lot of people say, well, if you have a superstar, and I can't name any soccer superstars now because I don't know any, but if you replace your top player with a superstar, how would that impact the team versus replacing the worst player? And it wasn't even close. The results proved out that in order for that team to improve, you need to replace the worst performing member of that team. And the reason why is because soccer can be thought of as a weak link sport. And what he means by that is that team is only as strong as its weakest link, because everyone is in position and because it requires everyone to do their job at each position. If you have a weak point, then everything falls apart. And so there's a whole idea that you need to make sure that you're bringing up your weakest performers. He contrasted that to the sport of basketball. And in basketball, where soccer can be considered a weak link sport, basketball can be considered a strong link sport, where you can have a single player go from one end of the court to the other to score. There are only 5 players at one time. So in that case, if you were to replace your best player with the best player in the league, who clearly is LeBron James, then that team will do much better than if you were to replace a lower tiered player. And so the whole reason he brings this up is he really kind of he made everyone in the audience really think about their teams. And I'd ask you to kind of relate that to your team, your board of governors, your committee chairs. As an ASHRAE team, are you more like a soccer team? Or are you more like a basketball team? Are you weak link or strong link? And I think everyone would agree that in order to be most effective, you want to make sure that all the members within your team are strong. Um, and I'm not saying you should get rid of your worst performing, but it provides opportunities to train them up and to help everyone be better. When everyone is better, when everyone is doing their job, then the chapter works very, very efficiently. The last thing you want is for you to try to be LeBron James and to try to do all the work by yourself and go from court to court. That's going to lead to burnout. It's going to lead to just a lot of inefficiencies. So kind of the takeaway from that is it's important that you really assemble a team that you can trust, that you can bring up, and that you provide them. We'll talk about it in a few minutes. Provide them with the training and the resources that they need to truly be successful. All right. So how do you find volunteers? This is a challenge that many chapters face. Sometimes it's tough when you have the same rotation of volunteers who every year kind of just swap positions as leaders within that organization, within that chapter. And so what I encourage you to do is to really look outwards to other members who may be involved. Maybe they attend the chapter meetings but aren't involved. Maybe they attend a golf tournament or go to specific events. Reach out and really look at, with the idea that the stronger the chapter becomes, the better they're able to serve the members within the chapter. I encourage you to reach out to your YEA members. Talk to firm principals and to, if needed, re-engage with some of the previous leaders who may have felt that burnout and kind of walked away. So this isn't obviously the answer to everything, but it's a start. And if you continue to have challenges filling those positions, please reach out to your regional team, and we'll do anything that we can to help you with that. When you've got your team together, it's important to have that planning meeting. I referenced it earlier. You can have a planning meeting during the summer, probably virtually. This is a picture. I always like this picture of when I was a member of the Central Arizona board, and we actually had a retreat up in the mountains, and we all kind of got together and kind of hashed out what our goals were for the year. These are great meetings because it's an opportunity for team building. It's a great time to establish, what are those measurable goals and to kind of map out that year. So encourage you, if you haven't already done so, to have your chapter planning meeting. Then you execute. You've got a plan in place, it's written, it's worked out, you've got your MBOs, now you have to execute it based on the schedule, that calendar that you've already put together. And so there are a couple of key points you want to remember. Effective board meetings are always important. When I think about board meetings, ASHRAE board meeting is just like any other meeting that you would attend. So there should be a level of expectation in terms of how people conduct themselves, the level of professionalism, and the attention to detail that you normally have at a business meeting that you want to apply to a chapter meeting as well as a board meeting, because it's every bit as important. So what I'm talking about are things like make sure that you have an agenda, make sure that everyone's on time, there are rules in place, you follow Robert's Rules of Order, and there's clear communication and accountability across the line. I've been to countless board meetings, and I'm guilty of this myself when I served on both Central Arizona and San Diego chapter boards, where I might be the chair of a certain committee, and we go around through the meeting. And they say, Devin, what's your report for the month? And I say, no report. I'll get you something next month. And that happens a few months in a row, and then all of a sudden, really nothing's being done. And if you use those meetings as a kind of a check-in time, if nothing's being done, then really you're not achieving your goals. You're not getting to that finish line. You're not really seeing your vision come to fruition. And so it's about accountability, having that agenda, having action items in place, and having that level of expectation on your board members so that they understand that they need to get their stuff done. So we've talked about your vision. We've talked about your roadmap to success, developing a plan. and that all entails working with your team. And so the next one is empowering your team. And I love that word, empowering your team, because we don't want to be in a position where you're just barking orders and directing people and telling people what to do. You want to have them buy into your vision, and in doing so, they're going to want to find innovative, new creative ways to execute on that plan and make things happen. So you don't necessarily have to babysit them. You don't have to kind of tell them everything that needs to be done. You set a level of expectation of what the goals are and empower them to move forward and find the best ways to do that. It's important to understand what those goals and expectations are. Again, Manual for Chapter Operations. Section 1 covers, kind of the executive officers, if you will, the president, president-elect, vice president, secretary, treasurer, board of governors. And then section number 2 talks about committee chairs. And this is a really important section, because I think a lot of times when we go out, when we reach out to volunteers and we ask them, would you be interested in being, say, the membership promotion chair or the research promotion chair? Sometimes there's a little ambiguity there. They don't even know what that entails. Well, the nice thing with this is it clearly defines for every section what that position does and what the action items, what the responsibilities of each position is. And so it's very clear. I'll never forget when I was on the Central Arizona board, the president one year is Mark Cunningham. He actually took the Manual for Chapter Operations and copied, this was back in the day, so he physically photocopied every page and then cut out or separated the sections for each person. So at that time, I was I believe the chapter treasurer. So he gave me a book that highlighted all of the treasurer responsibilities. And so, there are different ways to do that, especially in this day and age. We're much more electronic now, but it's a way that we're clearly defining what the roles and responsibilities are for each of those members. It should be noted, let me back up one, that there are a lot of committees that are shown here, and you don't necessarily have to have all of these committees. You want to see what makes the most sense given the number of volunteers you have and how large your chapter is and how you operate. But I will say that of these committees, there are 6 that are required. The 6 required committees are student activities, research promotion, membership promotion, government affairs, CTTC, and YEA. So you want to make sure that you have those chairs in place on your CIQ by June 1st. All right? So how do you equip your board? One great way is through training. Okay, we want to make sure that we provide the resources for all of your chairs to be as successful as possible. The great thing is that ASHRAE has developed some great training tools, depending on what role they have, to help them be successful. There are actually almost too many tools, and they're in multiple places, but you'll find them, not only in the Manual for Chapter Operations that lays out that kind of basic rules. But if you look at membership promotion, RP, and student activities, they have centralized training, which this year will be held, I believe, I know for MP and SA electronically, virtually. And so it's something that's very easy to access. They don't have to fly to Austin. They don't have to go maybe to Chicago. They can do that from their home office. And it's a great way to get very comprehensive training for each of those positions. Aside from that, we have the workshops that are going to be coming up at CRC. Our CRC will also be held virtually this year. And at CRC, we are going to be putting out a schedule that has different workshops. The nice thing with that is rather than when we have a live CRC, many times the workshops are, held concurrently. This is an opportunity that you and other members within your board can actually attend each of these different workshops, and you can get more training that way. And I'd encourage you to have your board go through as many of those different trainings, just so they have a better understanding of chapter operations from each of those committees' perspectives. Okay. There's also some leadership training. It shows Leadership Academy. Leadership Academy is a program that was developed to help groom and raise up chapter leaders, to have better equip them to serve at the chapter level and then potentially at the regional and society level. We just had that back in March, right before the COVID-19 crisis. As a matter of fact, it's the last meeting that I went to. One of the last meetings I went to before we went into lockdown. So it's up to the board to decide whether or not we are able to offer that program next year. But that's for all members. There's no age requirement there. For YEA, we do have the YEA leadership weekends and other trainings that are available. And again, I think it's up in the air still whether or not they're going to be virtual or what their schedule is for that. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of things. I've thrown a lot at you in this past half hour. We talked about really kind of looking at your vision, defining your vision, laying out your plan of attack, and then equipping your team to execute on that. I want to talk very briefly about just some best practices. And I love this quote that's apparently is being attributed to Mahatma Gandhi. And it's a sign of a good leader is not how many followers you have, but how many leaders you create. And that's really what we want to do. We want to empower our team, empower our future leaders so that they can come up and take over. We don't want to be in that position that some chapters struggle with where you have one set of people who have to do it all because we're not bringing people up. We want to make sure that we're providing with that training. So the first thing I want to talk about is lead by example. And I think it goes without saying, if you're in a leadership position within your organization, or certainly you've been in leadership positions within ASHRAE, you want to make sure that you lead by example. If your expectation is that committee members, say, are at board meetings on time, then make sure that you're on time. If you want to make sure that all of your board members submit their reports in a timely manner, make sure that you're communicating in a timely manner as well. You are the leader of this chapter moving forward for Society Year 2021. You want to make sure that you demonstrate the virtues and the attributes that you want exhibited by your team, by your board members, by your committee members. All right, so lead by example. The next one is delegate. Delegate, delegate, delegate. I've already said it multiple times throughout this presentation, so I don't want to beat you over the head with it, but don't try to do everything yourself. You want to make sure that you put your team in place, a team that you trust, a team that you can just hand off things so that you're not the one who has to do everything yourself. You may have a vision in your head of how perfect everything can be, but it's better for someone else. If someone else can do something 85, 75% to what your standard is, then let them do it, because that's better than you taking that on yourself to try to get everything at 100%. So learn how to delegate. Make sure that it's clear what your expectations are. Obviously, whenever you delegate, you lay out what the expectations are, what the deadline is, so that they understand that. So learn how to delegate so you don't burn yourself out. And the last thing I want to hit you with, or emphasize, that's a wrong word, hit you with. Last thing I want to emphasize is communication. Communicate, communicate, communicate. You want to communicate with your board, communicate with your members, and communicate with your regional team. One of the frustrations that many ASHRAE members have is they don't know what's going on. And so you want to make sure that you're always completely transparent and you're able to tell board members, chapter members, and regional leaders what's going on. So when you're communicating with your board, have that strategic planning session. Ensure that everyone has a full understanding of what your vision is, the vision for your year, and what your goals and expectations are throughout that year. Make sure they understand what their roles and responsibilities, how they fit into that plan. Very important. You need to learn how to listen. If you probably know how to listen. So you wouldn't be in this position if you didn't already know that. But it's important that you always stop. Sometimes there's a tendency for us when we're in the midst of situations to spend time formulating in our mind what we're going to say in response. And when we do that, we kind of discount everything that's being said. We need to train ourselves and make sure that we're always mindful that we're listening to what the other person is saying. And whenever I find myself in challenging situations, what I always like to do is take a deep breath, pause, and put myself in that other person's position. What are they thinking? Why are they thinking that way? And when you start to understand their perspective, their point of view, when you're actually actively listening, then you see their perspective and your initial reaction may not be the correct reaction. So make sure you listen. We've got great resources available from a technology standpoint, whether it be email, WhatsApp, Facebook, Basecamp. I encourage you, if you're not already doing so, use Basecamp. You can get a Basecamp set up if you don't already have one for your chapter. An amazing way to organize your calendar, to organize your documents for your chapter, and to have, you can have dialogue between all of the chapter members and the chapter, or at least the chapter leaders. WhatsApp, if you're not already using this was somewhat new. I've used it in the past. I know it's much, much bigger in other parts of the country, but Corinne LeBlanc made this recommendation, and our entire regional team is now on a WhatsApp thread. And so it's a very easy way for us to all instantly communicate with each other. If you and your board members, if something comes up, it's very easy for you to do that. I know it's another app you need to sign up for, but if you're not already on that's something you may want to consider. I think it works very, very well. Chair effective board meetings. Already talked, make sure you've got an agenda, make sure you follow Robert's Rules of Order. All right, let's communicate with your board members. Now, how do you communicate with your members? Well, I think the number one thing when you communicate with your board members is, put yourself in their position. What are they looking for? They want to know, when is the meeting? How do I sign up? What's the topic? When is the golf tournament? Things like that. So where do you put all of that information? Your chapter website. And so it's imperative that you have the resources in place to make sure that your chapter website is up to date at all times. I'll say that as a chapter member myself, and as a regional member, as a regional officer throughout the past several years, is oftentimes I find myself in a certain area, a different city, and I'd like to know, when is the chapter meeting. If I'm happen to be there that time, I always like to come by. And the number of chapter websites that are not updated. And so if someone is trying to actively participate in the chapter, if they want to go to meetings, they want to be involved, and they go to a chapter website that says the next meeting is September 2019, then there's a disconnect there. You're not really creating that great experience for that potential member. And so I cannot stress enough, have your website up to date. Take advantage of email for meeting announcements, for flyers, for event postings. Leverage social media. I know that some people, they try to be a little more private. They don't want to get into things like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, but it's a very, very powerful way to connect with your chapter members if they are on those platforms. And having a social media presence also helps if you're trying to get new members. It's very easy for instance, someone to come on, log into your Facebook page and look at all the great things, all the pictures of past events. So make sure you're able to leverage that. Newsletters, if you have newsletters, it could be electronic, it could be printed. Make sure that those are up to date and sent out in a timely manner. And then take advantage of some of the tools and as far as surveys that are available. A lot of chapters will do surveys at the end of every chapter meeting, but there are also surveys, sites like SurveyMonkey that, with depending on your account, you can send out different surveys, really gauge the level of interest in certain topics, for instance, in certain events. Kind of see what your chapter members want, so that as you put your plan together, you can really ensure that it best meets the needs of your chapter members. The last end of communicate is communicate with your regional team. Again, as I mentioned before, our role, everything that we do as chapter leaders is to support you, to provide you with the support to be as successful as possible. So I encourage you that if you've got questions, if you've got concerns, if you've got problems, reach out to your regional team. We'll have a directory soon, or you can go to the regional website where you can get contact information. And so we want you to be comfortable with us, reaching out to us, and don't feel like you're a chapter alone, kind of trying to struggle through some things. We want to be there to help support you. One of the ways we'd like to communicate is I'd like to encourage all of the chapters to use, you can use your chapter Basecamp to take care of your chapter business, but also you can communicate through through the chapter collaboration base camp for Region 10. And this is something that we just recently set up. I think for those who've been to CRCs in the past, one of the great things with CRCs is the opportunity to kind of share best practices, to talk about events that have been done by certain chapters, and then it allows other chapters to get visibility of that so they can mimic that. So this is a way that if you have, let's say you've got a great idea for a chapter event, you can post it on this site, and that way everyone can see what's going on. If you had, say, a great STEM event at a local elementary school, post pictures. You can put those on here as well. And one of the things that we're going to be doing as a leadership team is really looking at what the chapters are doing, where they're struggling, where they're having successes, and really use that to help strengthen all of the chapters within the region. So there's the base camp, and then there's also the Facebook page. Again, some people I know don't want to be on Facebook, but if you are on Facebook, I encourage you to follow ASHRAE Region 10. We've got a page there, obviously. And one of the things that we're going to be doing, because we want to be able to communicate to you as well, is we're looking at weekly or bi-weekly Facebook Live videos, probably on Fridays, where we give you updates on things that are going on in the region. We highlight some of the success stories within the region, talk about deadlines and things that are coming up, and focus on one key aspect of chapter operations. So it's kind of a way for us to touch base with you on a semi-regular basis. You can always access these Facebook Live videos at your convenience, but if you follow it, you can get updates and you know when those happen. And if you're on the video while it's live, it gives us an opportunity to interact directly with you. So it's another way, again, to really put together a platform that we're all actively communicating on. So that is on the Facebook page. And then emails, of course, when you've got meetings, events, encourage you to reach out to the appropriate RVC. If you have, say, an MP night or an RP night, student activities night, things like that. You want to make sure that the RVC is involved. If you've got great YA events put together, I send those off to Elise, and she'll kind of note those as well. So keep us involved. Again, we're not trying to kind of we're not babysitting anyone here. We're really here to help provide you with that support. So let us know what is going on. All right. So I hit a bunch of stuff. Wow, 42 minutes. Okay. So make your mark. That's my challenge to you as you look forward to your 2020-21 presidential year. This is the year. You've been waiting for this, right? You've kind of worked your way up through the chairs, and this is your year. So I challenge you to make your mark. Don't just rely on kind of the best practices that have been used for years and years and years. Don't fall prey to that "we've always done it that way" excuse. Evaluate how your chapter is operating now in the year 2020 with this COVID-19 crisis, and look at different ways that you can perhaps adjust, pivot, adapt to how your chapter members are reacting and acting in this day and age. And so if you need to make changes to how you do things, have those discussions with your board and make your mark. This is your year. And so if you have any questions or concerns, please let us know. This has been kind of the first video, and we look forward, hopefully you'll have the opportunity to watch the other videos, and then we've got the President-elect training schedule. So this is just the first one. We're going to be continuing this dialogue back and forth through emails, through Facebook Live videos, and so you're going to get sick of this face. I know. Yeah. Okay. So having said that, thank you again for your time. We look forward, really, really excited for this year. We know that there are going to be challenges in how, what's the climate going to be like in terms of work from home and virtual meetings as we really kick off the meeting cycle in September. How are we going to deal with special events? Those are all things that we're going to be talking about through CRC, and we look forward to working with you as you kind of work through this crisis at your chapter level. So thank you, and you're going to do awesome. Have fun. Oh, I forgot. Have fun. Look at all those fun people. Yeah, this was from President-elect training last year in Lake Tahoe. And so we're going to have fun this year. It's only worth it if we have fun. All right. So that's all I have. And take care.